Hello, welcome back to the Goodness Margin, the place where we find margin for the good things in life. A question I get from you so often in so many ways is, how do I get my spouse on board when I want to minimize? So today we're talking about marriage and minimalism, and I have with me licensed therapists Adam and Carissa King. They have a wonderful podcast, Dear Young Married Couple, where they share all of this information with you. So this is part of our conversation. Today we have special guests with us, Adam and Carissa King. Adam and Carissa, I am so excited that you are here with me. You are someone professionally that can speak to a question that I get all the time. So what if I want to be a minimalist and my spouse does not, or if we have some conflict in that area? And it's a question that from the very beginning I would get, and I just don't really feel like I have the expertise to speak to that because I know that every relationship is different. But you guys, as licensed therapists, this is what you do every single day. And if you guys who are watching do not follow them, I will put the link below to your podcast, which is an amazing podcast. I know I have learned so much, and my marriage has benefited from your podcast. And your cards. I had bought them and we have done them a little bit, and then I broke them out again recently, and I really enjoyed them. So thank you for that. So we'll link all that in the blog post and also in the YouTube link here below.
Awesome. Well, for those who don't know, Shelley was actually on our podcast a few months back, and we had so much good feedback about that episode.
Such good feedback. Yeah.
So maybe Shelley can link that particular episode in the show notes so you can go listen.
That was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed talking to you guys.
It was
very much fun. So today we're going to talk about 3 sort of different categories. And when we opened this up on Instagram for questions, I got a ton of questions, and a lot of them were very redundant. So I'm going to touch on what the questions are. But the first category is just basically basic minimalism, basic decluttering. So a lot of questions surrounding, I want to do it, my spouse doesn't, what do I do now?
Excellent questions.
Yeah, go ahead, babe.
So we told Shelley before the interview started, because we saw these lists of questions from Shelley's audience, and we were like, okay, so all these questions really boil down to one big tool that we're going to teach. Is that okay? And she's like, yes. So we're going to teach this tool, and it really helps couples who are in conflict. And the studies show, John Gottman did a lot of research. He's the foremost researcher in marriage counseling and marriage in general. And he did research that shows that about 2/3 of our conflicts are actually unresolvable. Like you can't solve about 2/3 of our conflicts. And so we're like, okay, so if that's the case, because, we have tools for solving some conflicts, which we'll share toward the end with the last set of questions. But when it's one of these things where it's like, we just can't solve this conflict, what do you do then? And we have a tool for that.
Yeah, this actually happens a lot when people are on 2 different pages. And that's generally why they come, right? There's some, or they're just like, oh, we argue about everything. And then it really comes down to a few different principles or values that they don't agree on. And that takes some time to find sometimes. But in this situation or these questions, the first place that I would advise people to do is just to talk about, what do we mean? Defining terms. Because if we're talking about minimalism with his tools, he's gonna be like, no, stay away from my stuff. Right. But if she's like, I want to get rid of some towels, or, like, I'm totally belittling and, separating, but like, he's gonna be like, yeah, whatever. So we have to talk about, like, okay, what are we talking about? In what areas and categories are we talking about minimalism? Is it digital minimalism? Like, are you getting rid of my Rolodex? Well, if he's been connected to that for 30 years, that's gonna be really hard. So maybe we have to work into that. So I guess defining terms would be the first step that I would probably go about, like, and maybe start with something simple that he can get on board with. Maybe that's just, everybody has a junk drawer, right? It's like at the corner of your, or maybe not you, but like, it seems like everybody has the junk drawer in the corner of their, kitchen. That's like the catch-all, like your scissors, your pens, your whatever. And maybe it's just like decluttering that. That's the first step. And then when he sees the benefits, he could start getting on board. So that's kind of probably where where we'd start with this tool. It's like, okay, defining terms. Well, first it needs to be a conversation. Okay, let me step back. Most of the times I've seen where people don't agree is when it's like kind of an offhand, like they open up the drawer, you know, the junk drawer. They're looking like, this is a mess. I can't even see, like, you know, and then you're on the, you know, the opposite foot trying to figure out, like, with your spouse, like, why is it such a mess? And the other person's defensive. So in the moment is not the time to say, we need to declutter a house. Let's get rid of half of stuff we have. You know, like, that's not the time. We probably need to, like, have a conversation. Remember when we had the junk drawer incident, right? And go from there.
Yeah. Yeah. So we're backtracking a little bit to talk about when we're in the moment, in the heat of the moment, it's not the right time to solve the conflict. And that's when you actually need to take a time out. And I would imagine a lot of the people who asked these questions had conflicts with their husband or with their spouse because they were in the heat of the moment. You know, trying to get rid of stuff, and their spouse is like, stop, I don't want to get rid of that. And so that's an important piece, is like, don't try to solve it in the moment. Actually plan for it. Put it on your calendar where you both agree and you say, okay, on this date, it's a week or two out, we're going to come together.
Or I would like to talk.
Yeah. Can we come together and talk about what we agree on in terms of minimalism?
Or we could even say organization, just to break the conversation.
Right.
And then once we understand, like, well, there's so much to organize, I feel overwhelmed. That's a good point. Why don't we start, like, getting rid of some stuff? So that's where, okay, we're now kind of slipping right now into the tool. So there's a couple of different tools here. The Art of Compromise is a John Gottman tool that we use. The first step is to try to find the yes. So yes lives in the land of no, right? So there's a whole bunch of area, and I'm doing a big circle with my arms. Like, there's a big area that maybe we don't agree on, but there is a core that we both can agree on. So we need to get to this area that we agree on. We both want to be able to find stuff quickly. We probably both want a peaceful house. We both want, so I'm getting back down to values. We both want an area or a place that we can relax and find visually appealing. Generally, that's not cluttered.
Yeah.
Generally, that's clean and it feels safe and it feels, you know, like I'm not going to, like, stub my toe on some, like, ancient thing sitting in the corner. Generally, we like clean lines and stuff like that. If they're listening to you, especially, right?
Right.
So, like, that's kind of the core areas that we can agree on. Now,
we want harmony and unity and peace.
Now, how we arrive at that might be going through the land of no. So it's first discovering, what can we get on board with? What can we agree with?
Because then you have a goal, right? Then you're on the same team. If you can say, like, oh, here's our yes, even though we have all these no's, we're living in the land of no. Here's our yes. And now let's come alongside each other instead of being enemies. You know, we're not face to face fighting each other. We're alongside each other on the same team. And we're coming alongside each other to figure out, how can we get to this yes that we both want?
How do we solve for it?
Yes. And so even if it's an unresolvable issue, which we'll get to that, at least we know we're both aiming for a yes. And we agree that we want harmony and peace and unity and, you know, calm and not chaos in our homes. I think most people could probably agree on that.
Yeah, absolutely. And so talking together about, this is what this looks like, this is what we want it to look like together, rather than coming at it as, your stuff is a mess and it's in the way, let's get rid of all of your stuff.
Exactly. Yep.
Yeah. Well, he's hearing, like, you want to get rid of my stuff. And I'm not okay with that.
Yeah.
Like, I know where my stuff is. Don't touch my stuff. Right. And especially with guys with tools and their stuff of, like, you know, I need 2 of everything. I know a lot of people like that.
Yeah.
And that could be a very particular, like, you know, stay away. But maybe we don't start with that stuff.
Right.
Yeah.
Maybe there could be buy-in with kind of common areas.
And so here's a question you can ask when you're trying to get to yes in the land of no is, help me understand your flexible areas, right? So maybe his knives are not his flexible area, right? But maybe the towels are.
Yeah.
And so help me understand your flexible areas.
Right. Or like, seems like everybody has like one of those, the cupboards or closets that's full of like random sheets and random blankets and random pillows, and like nothing is matched, and maybe they're yellow kind of, maybe we go through that first, because I'm saying he, because generally I think it's the woman who wants to like go minimalist, and the guys maybe like we're fine sort of thing. Maybe it's, but just for simplicity of terms, we'll use he and she, but I think it'd be much better to start there. And then once the fruits of that, like, that feels good to have that cleaned out, doesn't that have you noticed? No, well, go check it out. It feels good, doesn't it? And starting, so guess what we're championing here is, first of all, don't be reactive in the conversation, meaning that like the first, like we have an argument about clutter, and then you want to bring up minimalism and how you want to change the house. It's not the right time.
Right.
Set a time to discuss it. And then when you set that time, find out, what can we agree on? What are your values? What do you want the overall feeling of the house to be? What do you envision this place? How can we both arrive at that? What are your flexible areas? Where can we start maybe? So don't come hard line right at like, let's organize the garage, because sometimes I think the guys like feel like that's my place. That's my safe haven. That's where my tools are. Don't touch it. Right. And this just, I'm stereotyping, of course.
No, you're right there. Our garage has not been featured on the blog yet. It's the kayak land, and my husband and I, we're working through the garage.
Right.
We just received like 12,000 card decks for our inventory, and so Adam just built a bunch of shelves in the garage to store the card decks, and so we're like trying to get rid of things. So we're right in the land of figuring out our yeses in the garage.
We are. I think we're both on board with minimalism.
Yeah.
Or maybe a form of it.
Yeah.
I want to have enough to get what we want done. I think that would be minimalism, but definitely like the clean lines. We're always going through our kids' toys, and like, they only play with like 10% of what they get. Right. So trying to get rid of, like, always stay on top of that, getting rid of stuff. Like, it feels so good to not have tons of junk around.
Yeah.
And do you feel too sometimes that it's easy for all of us to notice the flaws in someone else? And so I might notice that my spouse has too many books. Well, I don't really have.
You can't have too many books.
Yeah, we have a lot of books, and we don't have too many.
I'm playing,
but that's his stuff. Like that's his thing. Are his books, and so I might say, well, I want you to get rid of all of those, but he might say, well, what about all of those Starbucks coffee mugs? So I think it's important for us to kind of focus on ourselves first, right?
That's good.
Rather than like, hey, let's clean this house up. So why don't we get rid of your stuff?
Right.
That's probably where a lot of arguments can stem from.
They do. And so like in the example you gave, like, well, it's my coffee mugs, right? And then it's what's his thing?
Books.
Okay. Your books, my coffee mugs. There's a dream behind both of those. And that's actually the core of what we want to talk about. So there's a dream behind having all these books. That's how it is for us. We're not a minimalist with our books. Yeah. There's a dream behind having a library, a collection, a visual. There's a dream behind collecting these mugs. There's a reason why you collect these mugs. It's not because you need 50 mugs.
Right.
There's a dream behind it. There's a value behind it. And so that's a tool called the dream behind the conflict.
Okay.
And so in these situations where you've already looked at where's our yes in the land of no, and you've tried the art of compromise, there might be a dream behind the conflict. And that's where you have to decide, that I'm not going to be defensive. I'm not going to tackle him or her. I am going to be the dream catcher.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to find out what is the dream behind this conflict.
Yeah.
And so as the dream catcher, you're taking the stance of the listener, the active listener, and you're really prying into your spouse's world to become intimately familiar with it. What is it about the books for you? Right. And so we have some sample questions you can ask. We actually did a whole, we do a monthly live date night. And so in our monthly live date night, we tackle a topic and then we do a Q&A that's live. Well, in February, our monthly live date night was on the dream behind the conflict. So when you can't solve something, what do you do? That was the whole topic.
Yeah, I actually did this very tool with a couple last night as I was finishing sessions. And it was powerful. Like they had been arguing. Well, they had a big argument about something that was like kind of time sensitive. And he did all the wrong things. Like we're trying to, like he went right for it and didn't set a time. And because he was like, we got to get this done. Right. And they had to hold off until our next session, which was yesterday, to talk about it again because it was really shut down. And I remember him saying at the very end after we did this, because I put on because I'm the counselor, I put on that I'm listening. I'm just trying to understand. And I told her at the very beginning, I said, like, look, in this area, I feel like I am biased. And I kind of already understand your husband's stance. I feel like I don't need to dive further into his attitude on this subject. But I don't understand your side here. And I'm just saying right out from the bat, like, I don't know. So I want to try to understand where you're coming from here, just so like not pushing my agenda. I just want to understand you. I literally said those words. And we dove into this, and oh my word, like I saw him kind of like, wow, I didn't know any of this stuff. And some stuff had almost like nothing to do with really what we were trying to solve for. But all this other history and life experience and all this stuff. And even she's like, I don't even know why this is popping up. And I don't like this about myself. But every time he brings this up, I fight against it. Like all this stuff comes up. Now we have so much to talk about. So being willing, like Chris has said, to step back and not have to solve anything right then. And just hearing the story and hearing these are where these values were implanted in me. This is my story at growing up. That gives us so much, like, it's amazing how much relief you could see on the other person as they're understanding themselves and where these things are coming from.
And as counselors, we become the dream catcher sometimes, right? And like what happened last night, I didn't even know about this, but what happened last night with his clients, the man realized, oh, I can become the dream catcher. I can do what Adam's doing right now and be genuinely interested in my wife's stance on this and the dream behind the conflict. But people don't know where to start with that. And so we have to get kind of practical. Like, how do we actually figure out the dream behind the conflict? So we created a sheet actually that has sample questions for the dream catcher to ask and sample questions for the dreamer, or sample dreams for the dreamer to share about. And they're just samples, you can go off the sheet, but we'll share some. Is that okay? You want us to share some examples?
Absolutely. Yes. And I think this is kind of segueing us right into the next category.
It is.
Where we're talking about collections and people asking, well, what about, my husband has this valued collection, which I don't find the value in it, and the same vice versa, and then family history and all of that. So I think this speaks right to that.
That's exactly right. That's why we said the first 2 sections of your 3 sets of questions will have to do with this tool. So you've tried the art of compromise. Now it's like, okay, I need to understand you. I need to become the dream catcher. I'm going to set my own opinions aside and I'm just going to catch your dream. So here are sample questions you can ask. The first one is, how does this relate to your background or childhood history in some way? And then you just sit back and you listen. You hear what your spouse has to say about that.
The only way this can go wrong is that you start like acting like you want to get your opinion in. Like share your agenda every time he says something. Like, yeah, but remember I told you, right?
That
That's
doesn't
when
seem like that would go well.
right. And we watch it happen. And that's when we're in counseling. We're like, hey,
You're the dream
you're
catcher.
the dream catcher. Just listen. And here's a tip too. Open your body language.
Mhm.
Don't try to control what he says with your body language. Open it up and allow it to affect you. Like hear it and listen, be curious, put that on. You can disagree later,
Mhm.
Yeah.
but right now just catch it.
Because
Yeah.
sometimes like we see that, especially for women, when they're in the dream catcher position, they're like rolling their eyes and like sighing and like, oh yeah, your dad.
Your dad,
You know, just
Oh,
Yeah, I know he likes knives, but
and it's not helpful. So when you're the
No.
dream catcher, make sure your body, your demeanor demonstrates that you're the dream catcher. You can even put a hand on their leg and like, I want to listen. Like I'm here. Tell me, I want to soak it up.
yeah.
Yeah. So that's a first question you can ask and really be tuned in, ask more questions about that childhood story that they share. Another one is there a fear or disaster scenario in not having this dream honored?
Mm.
Right. So if we got rid of all these books, what's your fear?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, well, I fear that I'm not going to be able to find that one book when I have this sermon that I'm preparing for, or, I fear that, all the notes that I've made in these books over the years are just going to be trashed and gone forever.
Or I wasted time.
Yeah. My time is wasted. All the investment that I put into these books will just be thrown away if we get rid of them. So there might be fears associated with this. And then what are some core values that are part of your position on this issue? So like for us, a core value is that readers are leaders.
Mm-hmm.
And so, one of our core values on keeping our books is that we want to be leaders. We want to
Practice what we preach.
Practice what we preach. We want to raise our children to be leaders. And, oftentimes digital books are on the same device that all of our messages are on and all of our social media is on. And we don't want to be distracted by those things. We want to have focus when we're reading.
Right. Well, I have systems in my books where I take notes in a certain way so I can flip through a lot of times and find stuff really quickly.
Right. And that might not be the same core value for others.
Mm-hmm.
Some people might have grown up on digital books and they have a system on how they take notes in their digital books. And so their value is like having these backup storages where all their books, they have doubles of all their books because they don't want to lose all those digital notes, so everyone's going to have a different core value here. And so ask your spouse, what are some of your core values that are part of your position on this? Maybe for a mug collection, the core value is travel and adventure. And this reminds you of travel and adventure and these memories you've made at these places.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's super important to you to have these mugs to represent that. Maybe it's a tradition that your family did mugs. And so you're carrying on a tradition, so really try to dig in. What is this core value that you want them, that they're trying to honor in this dream?
Then the last question, is there a deeper purpose or goal in this for you? And Chris, it kind of already blended that one in with the last, but what is the goal or purpose with keeping this or with this position that you're holding?
And you might find that when you ask these questions, if it's not something that's a dream, if it's not something that has a core value behind it, that your spouse might realize like, this is kind of meaningless. Like, you're right. There isn't a deeper purpose behind this. I can get rid of these
I'm just
towels.
being stubborn.
Yeah.
Thank you for joining us today in this conversation. This is just one part of this conversation. And if you have not got to see the rest of these videos, you can find those links in the comments below. If you've enjoyed this video, I would encourage you to subscribe to my channel, click the bell so you can be notified when the next video goes live.